One of the reasons I chose to create the lighting first in this instance is that our lighting is going to drastically affect some of the materials in our scene. Currently, all of these objects have the same material, our Lambert 1 material that comes standard in the scene. So we're going to start to change that and add some different materials to a couple of objects. So first, let's do something easy, like making our bowl look like ceramic. I would point out that using the Arnold Render Viewer, we are able to select objects by clicking on them in the Render Viewer as well. You'll see that my bowl is now selected, and I'm going to assign a new material to this object by right-clicking and hitting Assign New Material. Since I know I'm going to be rendering an Arnold, I'm going to use some of the Arnold shaders. So under the Arnold tab, I'll choose Shader, and I usually choose the AI Standard Surface Shader because we can do quite a bit of things with this. Now if I hit play on our renderer again, now you're seeing we're getting a different result. Some of the things I want to pay attention to is the color of my bowl and the reflectivity of my bowl. So I'll go ahead and name this material. We'll name it Bowl, M-A-T, for bowl material. And then I'll change my color to something like blue. And that may be just a little too blue for me, so maybe I'll pull back a little bit. And so now we're seeing we're getting this blue material, but we're also seeing we're getting reflections in this material from our environment. We're seeing reflections from the windows that are behind us, and if we turn this around at a different angle, you'll also start to see reflections of the other objects in the scene in the side of the bowl. I would remind you that the AI Standard Surface shader has some presets that are saved. So if I go to my presets option, I can choose some of these presets and then make some slight changes to them. So for example, if I wanted to choose ceramic and replace this with ceramic, it will give us a ceramic option, and then I can go back and change this again back to my blue color that I had earlier. And although this is pretty close, now it's a little bit glossier and a little bit more like painted ceramic. It's important to remember that while we have the play button turned on, Maya might bog down a little bit. So I need to hit stop every now and then when I'm going to move around my scene or do something that might be taxing to the machine. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the material on this spoon. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and name some of these objects as well, because you'll notice that my objects are not clearly named. So again, my bowl, I will name this bowl, and my spoon, I will name spoon, and I'm going to apply a new material to this spoon. So if I right click, assign new material, I'm going to choose shader, AI Standard Surface. I'm going to go ahead and hit play to see the result we're getting. And so that looks a little bit more like a spoon, but I want this to look a little bit more like chrome. So if I hit stop on this while I go play around with the material, again, I'll name this spoon material. And under preset, you'll see that I have a preset for chrome. So I can replace all the settings. Understand that when I'm doing this, all this is doing is changing the details of all of these attributes to give us something that will look close to chrome. This isn't really changing the type of material, it's just changing all of these numbers. So if I go to preset and choose chrome and hit replace, now when I hit play to look at my render, you'll see that we're getting something that looks very reflective like a chrome spoon. Now, chrome may be a little bit too much in this instance. That's an awfully shiny spoon. So I can also choose to mix this with some other presets. So I can choose the presets and maybe add something like a little bit of brushed metal, maybe 10%. Let's see what that looks like. Not really enough. Maybe go ahead and add 50% brush metal. So this is going to give us a little bit more imperfections in the spoon. Now, one of the reasons that we're getting this completely reflective spoon is because our metalness is turned all the way up. So we could also adjust our metalness a little bit to pull that back down and get us something feeling a little bit more light like a spoon. So all of these are materials you can edit and manipulate in order to get a change. You don't have to just stick to the base preset. In fact, the presets are a really nice way of learning how the materials work, because if you choose one of the presets and it changes all of the attributes to that preset, you can use that information to learn how to create your own custom materials. Now I want to talk about one more object in our scene before we move on, which is this glass. If I go to this glass, I want this glass to seem as transparent as possible. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit play so we can look at this. And I want to talk about how there's a couple of misleading labels in some of these materials. If I right click and assign a new material, I'm going to assign again the AI standard surface. And I'm going to make sure that I have labeled this glass and glass material. I want you to notice that there's no transparency listed in these first few tabs. In fact, if you go all the way down to geometry, you can find opacity, but if I turn opacity down to 0, it doesn't really seem to do anything. That's because Maya recognizes one of two types of objects. An object is either opaque or an object is transparent. But recognize that a glass is not transparent. You can see a glass. Glass is an object that allows light to pass through it and warps that light. So I can select my object, my glass again, and I can go to the Arnold tab of the Shape node, and I can choose to uncheck Opaque. And now if I hit play, that opacity worked, but my glass disappeared. If I go to my glass material, I can bring my opacity back up, and you'll start to see it, but you'll see that it's not really looking like glass. It's more looking like my glass is a ghost. So this isn't always the way you want to go about making something look transparent. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my opacity all the way back up. And instead, I'm going to use this option of transmission. And what this means is it's going to allow light to transmit through it. Your object is not transparent, but light is still able to pass through it so we can see it. And the cool part about this is, just like real glass, that light will be warped as it passes through it. So if I just turn my transmission up, you'll start to see that we're getting something that looks much more like real glass. Now there are still a few problems with this, but this is a much better solution. One of the issues we're having though is we're not really getting any shadows underneath this glass. So one of the things I'm going to try is going to presets, and I'm going to change my preset to glass and just replace it to see what we get. Now this gets us a much shinier version of glass.